is Gabriela. M-am născut și am crescut în România. Am locuit în mai multe părți în România și acum locuiesc în Cluj de vreo 7 ani, în inima Transilvaniei.
Okay, so
Dracula's land.
I understood Monumești and I understood Transylvania in the end, but what was between? Nothing.
Excellent, you got the point.
Yeah, I need to work my Romanian.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so as we're talking a lot about this, you told me that you grew up under the communism here in Romania.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell maybe more about this? How was it to grow up under this regime?
Right. So when the communism fell here, I was 14. So for my first 14 years of life were spent in the communist regime that, the one we had here, because everywhere it has a certain specific. Mm-hmm. How it was for me, it was good actually, because
really?
yes, mostly because I was a child. I was allowed to, I just played a lot outside with children and so on. But yes, even as a child, I could clearly see that some things are not right. Not only that there's a lot of talk, at least here, about the poverty that it existed during the communist times. Well, I didn't necessarily perceive it as poverty, but because I didn't have a comparison term, so some abundance that I could compare it with, but indeed it felt like maybe too basic.
Yeah.
So I remember, for instance, when my parents took me to the supermarket in the small time I grew up, and I went there like twice a year, before the school started and before the summer started, and I could get, let's say they wanted to buy me a dress for my age group, that was only one type of dress available, and that was it.
Yeah.
The same with the shoes or the sandals, or if I wanted a ball, let's say, to play outside, there was one type of ball.
Always one type, yes.
Yeah. So it felt maybe a bit too basic. Even if again, because of the censorship, like massive censorship in TV and the radio and so on, maybe not so much for me as a child, but people knew that something much more is available, but they didn't know exactly what.
What was available?
Yeah, because the movies, by the way, that's actually an interesting point.
Yeah.
Every night we had like 2 hours of television, the news bulletin, and then a movie. And all the movies we had, although it was the 80s, right? The movies they made available for us were the classical movies from the 1940s, the American movies.
Okay, the American movies.
Yeah, black and white. Oh, okay, the television was black and white anyway, but only the classical movies. So this is maybe why I love the classical movies now. But at the time, that was everything. And therefore, not even via this medium you could see what's the abundance available in the West, right?
Okay.
Okay.
So as you didn't have any comparison with the West, you only knew what you had. This is maybe why you maybe didn't question a lot the
yes,
situation.
Exactly. And especially as a child, you don't care about things, about stuff. I remember my sister, who is 9 years older than me, that she was suffering for not having jeans and Converse baskets, and I was like, I don't know, I don't care, I don't know what that is. I don't know how she knew about this, because she was a teenager at the time, but to me that was not a thing. Another aspect that was clearly not natural, even for us as kids, was that I don't know how to put it in a few words. Basically, we could see in our parents, especially from them, that we were not allowed to say anything. So, for instance, very rarely there was like a joke with our dictator, about our dictator, that we heard from other kids, and I remember clearly. I even remember the joke because I was probably something like 8 years old. I don't know, and I heard this joke about Ceausescu, and
What was the joke?
it was ridiculous. Yeah, so he didn't have much education.
Yeah. Okay.
And the joke was about when he traveled to I think Spain or something like this, a foreign country, and he was supposed to greet a large crowd over there, and he didn't speak the language, and he asked one of his people to write like a greeting or a very small discourse, to write it on a piece of paper, and that he would hide it on the back of his tie, right? And the person did that, and he had like a little piece of paper with his discourse written there. But it fell until he reached the stage. The little piece of paper fell, and and on the back of every tie at the time, it was made of polyester. In Romanian probably. And when he checked his tie to see the speech, he saw only polyester, and he said, "Poliesteros soldados." So I don't know, a ridiculous little joke, but we were amused. I mean, and as soon as I heard it from my colleagues, that's in school, I went back home and I said this to my mother and father during dinner, and I expected them to, at least smile or if not laugh, and instead they were like turning like very worried. "You should never say such jokes again. Where did you hear this from? Never say this again." And I was like, oh, okay, what did I do? Because suddenly it was like I did something very bad, and it was the case throughout all those years. So you were not supposed to say any kind of joke about the communism, about the party, about why? Because the dictatorship at the time had a very effective system, apparently, of keeping people under control by having a lot of his men, ordinary people with ordinary jobs. So your neighbor could have been such a spy in a way. So you never knew where the danger can come from, basically.
And what did you risk if you say these kind of jokes? What did you risk?
At the time, I didn't know what was the risk. I learned after the community, and when I grew up, probably if I was older at the time, I could have known. Yes, but like this, as a child, they didn't explain to me, and I learned only afterwards. And I know that there were people, not children, because I understood that if a child was kind of caught with something illegal, the parents were responsible for this, were held responsible for this. So I understood that there were adults, like ordinary people, who said such a joke or made an inappropriate comment in a risky environment and so on, and they were taken to so this network was called the security. So they were taken to the security facilities, and they were either beaten or they just disappeared, or so no one knows what happened to them, apparently. But bad things anyway. So not a fine or something like this. It was an underground type of of a system and punishment, and all this fear was like for something not so clearly defined, really.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not clearly defined, maybe it's scarier actually.
Yes, probably
Okay.
for the adults at the time it was. So these were like the biggest signs of something not being right
Yeah.
when I grew up.
Yeah. And you also told me something about the television, like you saw big contrast between what
Right.
they were showing about the country in the television and what you were
Yes,
seeing.
yes. So yeah, the news bulletin was like 10 minutes or something like this every night, and we had it every night. And yes, and the news were only about either what our president trips to foreign countries and so on. Occasionally, nowadays they do it much more than at the time. But what it was primarily about, it was about how good Romania is doing in all the ways, at all levels, especially economically, in terms of industry, in terms of everything that means economic growth. So every night we were presented with how amazing harvest of certain crops Romania had, and what's fantastic production of I don't know, in metallurgy or something like this, and this was like without exception, everything was above what was predicted and expected and planned.
Yeah.
Everything, so nothing was as planned, everything was better.
Okay.
All the time. And this was even for us as children, or at least for me, it felt although no one commented in my family, so my parents were very careful and probably not to say anything
wrong,
yet, while I was there at least. But they it was something like, I mean, I could hear about all these amazing results that the country had economically for years and years and years, and it still felt like super basic what we were living and experiencing, and also the food shortages that we had to go through. So that's everyone who grew up at the time, you will hear talking about the food shortages. It was a little bit better in some places like Bucharest, and the news were only about either what our president trips to foreign countries and so on. Occasionally, nowadays they do it much more than at the time. But what it was primarily about, it was about how good Romania is doing in all the ways, at all levels, especially economically, in terms of industry, in terms of everything that means economic growth. So every night we were presented with how amazing harvest of certain crops Romania had, and what's fantastic production of I don't know, in metallurgy or something like this, and this was like without exception, everything was above what was predicted and expected and planned. Everything, so nothing was as planned, everything was better. All the time. And this was even for us as children, or at least for me, it felt although no one commented in my family, so my parents were very careful and probably not to say anything
wrong,
yet, while I was there at least. But they it was something like, I mean, I could hear about all these amazing results that the country had economically for years and years and years, and it still felt like super basic what we were living and experiencing, and also the food shortages that we had to go through. So that's everyone who grew up at the time, you will hear talking about the food shortages. It was a little bit better in some places like Bucharest and the big cities, and much worse in smaller towns. And I come from a small town, so but okay, I thanks to my mother at least, I can say that I was starving at any point. So I was good with this, but again, what they were describing on TV felt in a way like something that it was hard to imagine for me. I couldn't, because I don't remember if they showed also images as in of these huge results. Okay, show me, I don't remember. I remember some images on how the fields were being exploited and so on. Some footage from some factories, but I don't necessarily remember like, okay, this is the abundance that the country has. So to me it felt like kind of empty words in a way, as in, they were describing a thing that had nothing to do with Romania, or with the Romania that I was experiencing at least. And also it was hard to imagine. I couldn't imagine. I didn't know what that meant. So, yeah.
Okay, so you could feel like that at a young age, that in a way they were lying to you on TV.
Yes, so something was definitely not authentic there.
Yeah.
At the time, I don't think I would have used the word lying.
Yeah.
Especially because, that was the authority. So all this news, there was one television in the entire country. And they were talking about the government, what the government did, what the government plans to do for Romania, for us, for the country, and so on, and about all these amazing results that Romania had. So, yeah, I don't think I would call that a lie, but it was like at the time. Now, although now there are some at any level. The government claimed they knew what they were doing.
Okay.
Now it's proven that they didn't know what they were doing. But individually, at least, we didn't know what to do with this freedom.
Yeah, you had maybe too much freedom just
yes, and we didn't know another, and also my parents and so on, because we had here communism like for 40 years, right? So they didn't know what else they could do different than what they did before. This actually because that was because during the communist time there was no private property over in big things like real estate belong to the state only. So people didn't own anything in this respect. Yeah, the most expensive thing you could have was a car. Of course, a Romanian car. But other than this, no. So also there was zero private initiative at the time, because the state owned everything, just like these communist.
They tell you everything you should do. They told you everything you should do.
Yeah, and so no one had a private business, or the idea of business was out of didn't even exist in vocabulary.
Okay.
Probably in the dictionary it was, but
it was not used in.
I didn't. Yeah,
everyday
we
life.
have the certain word in Romanian for this. I don't remember to have ever heard it, let alone use it.
And
so,
what would be the consequences of going through all of this on the psychology that the Romanian society has today? I mean, we are now.
What I see is so now we're 30-something years later, and we still struggle big time with entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial mentality. Because we grew up in this environment where anything entrepreneurial was out of question, so it was pointless to even think about it. Now, our general approach is I'm not talking necessarily about myself, but I see it, in general. People are not only just get a job, To make you to do something entrepreneurial, this is super risky. How do you do that exactly? I see a lot of struggle in the last 15 to 20 years here with educating ourselves toward an entrepreneurial mentality, but unfortunately, it looks like the country who generates most knowledge in this is the United States. So, and they have a very different, let's put it like culture and so on. So there are trainers here and teachers and in entrepreneurship who the last years they kind of ended up with the conclusion that the entrepreneurial knowledge that comes from the US doesn't quite match the Romanian spirit. So we would have to learn this from other sources, but so far at least, based on what I know, we couldn't quite identify these sources. So, I mean, as an entrepreneurial way that would match the Romanian style or the Romanian structure, inner structure in a way.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think that in your life, so you kind of have a very independent life. I mean, you told me about your trips,
Yeah.
How did you get to build maybe on a more personal side this independence of mind? How did it start?
That's a good question. How did it start? Well, I guess I'm fundamentally unconventional, maybe.
Yeah.
And so I tend to question the traditional ways or the whatever tends to be imposed. I'm like, hold on. What's the no 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 why is this so let's investigate.
Okay.
Is this good for me or not, you know? So I look around and I see people doing what I'm recommended to do.
Yeah.
Who don't seem happy at all. They don't seem that they're doing so well. So then I'm like, this path might not be for me. Let's search for something else.
Okay.
Right. So I kind of always had this approach, and I discovered this idea of entrepreneurship. I think in maybe during my student years, university years, where the initiative in terms of entrepreneurship was still a very foreign concept. But I was like, no, I want to do something else than just get a job and then stick to that job and so on. At the time, not even this idea of building a career was not even present so much. It was, we knew some things about it from books or something like this that we read even during the communist times, but it was something that didn't quite match what was happening here. So, the career style of places to work and so on came to Romania, like the big corporations and so on, came to Romania only after the year of 2000, kind of around that time. So until then, it was, the private initiative in terms of businesses and so on during that decade consisted basically in very small stores that were, buying from someplace and selling. And that was it. I mean, now no big businesses, factories or something like this that would be private. Nowadays we have some of these in Romania, yes, still very few comparing to the size of the country. And again, this is explained by this struggle we have with entrepreneurship. Yes, but coming back to how I got
story,
to,
yes.
So, I was like, okay, if I don't want this job, then what do I want? And when I was asking myself these questions, it was toward the end of my university years. Some corporations were already here, and I was, impressed. Okay, super cool job. So I worked for this huge French corporation, and they were doing an amazing job for us, the employees, and wow, okay, super cool. And probably this admiration inspired me into looking for how do they do this.
Okay.
And gradually I started educating myself in entrepreneurship, and I read a lot of books about it and so on. And I took courses, and I've read like any kind of articles, blogs, whatever, in this that I could. But I still feel that I didn't get it in a way. So although I have all this knowledge, is a kind of an intellectual knowledge, but is not necessarily part of who I am,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So maybe you needed to put it in practice.
Yes, and I did that. I tried that, but again, it didn't quite work as it looks like it works in America, right? So I don't know. And actually, I have something to say about this, because when I lived in America for half a year, suddenly, once there, I realized that I know why American businesses work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could see so clearly the difference between the American environment and the Romanian environment. I don't think I should necessarily enter into why this difference, but clearly the energy here in Romania is not of nature to favor entrepreneurship at any level. As a person who wants to, let's say, to build their own business is difficult on many levels. Then another level is your audience, your potential clients, and so on. They also kind of don't necessarily. Now, okay, we don't have any state-owned big factories and so on, but we have foreign corporations and huge companies that basically do the things here in Romania, and people kind of expect or understand rather to buy from these kind of producers rather than trusting a Romanian business, at a certain level, maybe very subtle somehow.
Okay, yeah.
And also another big level where entrepreneurship is not encouraged here is actually quite the opposite, is discouraged, I would say.
Yeah.
Although the official narrative is different, but is at a governmental and law and regulation type of level. So no, it's very hard to progress here as a business.
Okay, but still you kept on fighting to
Yeah,
make your own.
because I don't quit.
Yeah. And in a way, what would be your secret? How do you maybe cultivate this energy to find to how do you cultivate this energy for entrepreneurship, for doing your own things?
Mm-hmm. Well, so 12 years ago, more than 13 years ago, I discovered the freedom that an activity that you organize for yourself gives you. And up to that time, I kept having jobs, but then I started working online, and that was like, to me, okay, I knew about it, of course, but I didn't experience it. And when I started working online and seeing, wow, this is amazing. I mean, I can, and a super important aspect, I can work from wherever in the world I have internet. That's amazing. So after I discovered this lifestyle, I said I will not go back to a job. Now I'm like, because, okay, and throughout the last years, and a lot of, throughout all these years, there were a lot of people insisting, Romanians, of course, and people well-intended, my family, good friends, and so on, which though have this old mentality, get a job, that's security, that's blah, blah. They kept advising me, no, you get a job. please, it's tiring already to keep hearing this. I don't want to get a job. And but now I'm having maybe like some tiny thoughts that in a very specific type of context, having a job for a while
Yeah.
might be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, but no. So my general approach is still to be on to work on my own.
Yeah.
And yeah, and online. And what do you do online? You're either freelancing, so you provide some services, or you have a business online. So yeah, a business online definitely brings you has a higher return on investment.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So in a way, I feel like you're an addicted to freedom, and the more freedom you discover, the more you want to keep it
Yeah,
for you.
it's my number one value.
Yeah, we can we can feel this by hearing you by listening to you, and I guess that since the 10, 13 year last year, you did travel a lot, so because of your
Yes.
you're a digital nomad in a way.
Yes, and after I started working online, right, and I was like, oh my god, I could go anywhere. I could, whoa, and I took advantage of this, and I did. So I lived in 4 countries already.
Which ones?
So Italy,
Italy.
Portugal, the United States, and Sweden.
Okay. Yeah.
Apart from Romania, so 4 other
Yeah.
countries. I lived there. Well, I don't know if but I call it I lived there because it was a minimum of 4 months spent in those countries, like in a row. And in other, I mean, for instance, in Sweden, I went repeatedly for some chunks of
time.
yeah, of time. So yeah. What was the question?
It was about I asked you, so in which country did you live, and maybe most of it. What I think it would be interesting to know is maybe what is your approach when traveling. What do you when you maybe plan a trip? What do you think about, for example?
Right. Yeah. So in all these foreign countries that I told you about, I lived in most of them right, at the time. So after I started working online for the next 3 years or something like this, maybe even more, I did that, and I found that that suits me the best. Instead of just traveling like for a week or I don't know, a few days, or it works to go there for a while. Why? Because I want to get to really know the place in a way, and that means not only to know it geographically, or but also to know as much as to get to know as much as I can out of the culture of the place, the mentality that people have, even their traditions, the customs. To me, this is very interesting. I mean, diversity in general, I appreciate diversity a lot. And to see, different ways of doing certain things with similar results, with even better results, is very interesting for me. But in general, it's such a joy, really, to discover people, to get to know them, to find. I don't know. I have this strong, deep belief that there's so much goodness in people, and wherever I go, I discover this.
Yeah.
And regardless of the country, even when in the northern cold countries, no, yeah, you.
And while traveling, what was your biggest surprise? Man, maybe I think you must have had one time when this belief of that everyone is good people, that you can find good everywhere, has been challenged. Did you have like what would be your most surprising experience in this
A
category?
positive or a negative, because I have both, positive or negative.
Well, let's start with maybe the negative and then the positive, if we can.
Yes. The negative was actually in Italy.
Yeah.
Which it's a Latin country, so close to Romania in so many ways. But like very soon after I went there, like the first days, I found a person that I was introduced to, and we were supposed to, at least exchange our names or
Yeah.
hello and so on. And as soon as I was introduced, the person who introduced me said, okay, she's Romanian. And that guy was close to, reaching his arm toward me to shake my hand.
Yeah.
And when he heard she's Romanian, he suddenly stopped and turned around and left. And to me, that was like, shocking.
Yeah.
Okay, at the time, indeed, this was again like 12 years ago. At the time, it's true that mass media did a very good job with building a bad reputation to Romanians
Yeah.
living in Italy. And I don't think that was a fair thing to do, because indeed, apparently there were some low quality Romanians there who went there and I don't know, did some small crimes
Okay. Yeah.
or something like this. But there was a huge number of Romanians there already who were working there, and now I mean, the recent years I looked online and I saw a lot of testimonials from Italian entrepreneurs, let's say, about Romanian workers, and all of them praised Romanians, and they said they are super reliable, very trustworthy. And it's not something that happened the last years.
Yeah.
It was the case also 12 years ago, but again, the mass media didn't talk about what was good, it tends to talk about what.
So maybe today the kind of reaction you had, maybe it's not, you would have less chance to have it, but still it's kind of rude.
Yes, so it was very rude, and I mean, especially to, if it happened like a month in or something like this, it would have been, but it was, I just arrived there, and that was like the welcoming.
And it was it the first country you were visiting, like to live?
Yes, it was the first.
Okay, yeah. So first day as a digital nomad.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And what was maybe the good experience, like the good surprise you had?
The good surprise was not about being Romanian or had anything to do with this. I just observed interesting things, such as the biggest I can think right now is how after, checking all these countries and so on. No, there's another one that comes to me. But yeah, I want to say something about this guy. This guy who reacted like this to me, and why it was, because why it was such a shock to me.
Yeah.
Is because my approach is, doesn't matter where you come from. All that matters is how you behave. Really, who you are in a way. Your origin, color of skin, it doesn't really matter. So, and it never mattered to me. There are a lot of stereotypes about certain nations and so on, and that I'm well aware of.
Yeah.
But even so, or for instance, there are so many stereotypes about the Romanian gypsies.
Yeah.
Let's put it like this. I don't have to look abroad. And even so, when I meet someone belonging to that culture or country or ethnicity group or something like this, I'm like open. Hey, I just want to see who you are, and I love if I'm aware of some very negative stereotypes about your group, the community and so on, I'll be more attentive. But still, I mean, I'll give you all the chances. So maybe this is why I had such a big shock with that guy, and it still weighs a lot in my memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now going back to the good things, yes. So what I've noticed during all these trips and living here and there and so on was a thing that I've never read anywhere about it, neither before and nor after. And it was that the geography of a country is super strongly related to how the people are in that country.
Okay, this is well,
Yes.
develop.
So yeah, and now I will give like two examples, two extreme examples. I will not mention the country though because I don't want. But in a country with pretty much a uniform geography,
Yeah.
regardless of which that is.
Okay.
I don't think there's a country with only mountains or a country with only like. But let's presume that it would be. The people tend to be kind of the same. So like uniform, yeah. In a country with, let's say, that's only like flat. Really.
Belgium.
Anywhere. So my observation was that the people tend to be the same. Okay. So you don't. It's a super exceptional occurrence to meet someone who'd be very different to all the rest, with a very different mentality or personality. Now I'm talking primarily in terms of personality. So they tend to kind of be the same. And now, to give the opposite example, in a country like Romania, where you find all the geography you can think of, you can also find very all the type of mindsets. People, yes, you can think of, in terms of personality, mindset, approach, and everything. So there's a huge variation in terms of people in a country with a high variation, geographically speaking.
Okay, so if I rephrase what you said, like living next to the sea, or living in the mountains, or living in the countryside would have a very big impact on how people think, behave, and.
Well, yes, it does have a big impact. That's another observation.
Yeah.
I can't. But if I have to, to focus on these kind of areas, I don't know about small areas, but about like a country type of place. Yes, that's my observation. I might be wrong, of course, but after I noticed this, I kept tracking, is this so, and wherever I went, I kind of saw the same thing. So it's an interesting discovery in a way.
Okay, yeah, that's a good lesson from your trips. And maybe if we come back maybe to the whole the globality of your trips, maybe could you say that maybe one big lesson it did teach you this decade of traveling, maybe?
It definitely, I don't know if it's, but it definitely made me feel like a citizen of the earth. And not that before I was very Romanian, let's say,
Yeah.
But I was not aware of this other dimension of perspective in a way. So now, after going in all these places, now I understand that the earth is here for us. It's not Romania is for me because I'm Romanian. The earth is here for us. So, it's more people said that that from a plane, if you look down, you see no borders, and that's true. And maybe I had a realization at a certain point that hey, I should be allowed to live anywhere on earth because I was born on earth, and I'm supposed to be here. I should not be confined by the borders of a certain country.
Okay.
That's unnatural. It's unnatural not only at the level of concept, but really it's limiting. It limits our freedom. Why should it be like that? Instead, what should be maybe the criterion to allow us to be, let's say, in these countries, because okay, it's not a natural reality, but it is a reality that we have countries and so on. Maybe a more accurate criterion than your citizenship or nationality and so on would be how good of a person you are, what you can contribute the other people with, right? So that should be what matters. So to me, it's unnatural that this is not what matters currently.
Yeah.
There are other aspects that matter most.
I think this is interesting to see maybe the evolution between what you said at first, like you were in a way confined in Romania, and today you feel like a citizen of the world. So I think maybe we can conclude on this. Maybe if you want to add like some a quote that inspires you to finish the interview, or a message you want to share with the people, even if you just shared one that was very very big.
Oh wow, okay. Well, I don't have an advice necessarily, but I can maybe share one of my of the key guidelines
Yeah.
that I run my life by, and that is part of a deeper understanding, a spiritual understanding, if you will, of that everything that we think and
Yeah.
say and do has an impact over our own life and over everyone else, really. So if we are aware of this, and the impact is, okay, there is a scale, a gray scale, but most of the times, really, you can clearly feel, if not think, as in see, that the impact is either positive or negative. So, and again, we don't even have to do something negative. It's enough to think it or speak it, right?
Okay.
And once I understood this, and I'm certain it is like this, I mean, well, it's a choice to believe in this idea, but once I understood this, I suddenly, this brought me a very different level of responsibility. And now I'm very careful. Well, of course, I'm human, so I have
We have flows.
yeah, gaps from time to time. But most of the time, I made it like a lifestyle to be very careful to what I think and what I speak out and what I do. And I think if all of us would be aware of this, this would be like really heaven on earth.
Well, beautiful words for the end. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.